Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 21st, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. Meeting called to order at 5:02 p.m. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Sliker, seconder. Councillor Feeblecorn. Item number 2, motion to adopt the agenda as presented, or any additions or deletions.
So moved.
I believe we have a new business item, on item number 6.1, River Road Safety, and an in-camera item 7.1, Fire Department. Get a mover for that, please.
So moved.
Councillor Hunt. Thank you. Item number 3, reception of delegations. Derek Eno is here to report on some bylaws. Go ahead, Derek.
Thank you, sir. So I wanted to go through, share my screen, can't I? There we go. I wanted to share with council the zoning bylaw update project that we have restarted. And I did want to ask council a few questions, but perhaps what we'll do is we'll go through some of those questions on the zoning bylaw project, but I'll also send through your administration just a questionnaire that maybe you can think about some things and then give me some input afterwards, because that's really what I want to do with all of our different councils, is get the input from the folks who are going to be adopting the zoning bylaw. It's your bylaw, so I need your input on what exactly you're looking for. Maybe just a bit of a background though. In 2021, we actually started a project to update all, at that time, 6 municipal zoning bylaws. Now we have 5 with the absence of Selkirk from the planning district. However, there were a number of factors that led to the stall of that project. One obviously being the pandemic that sort of put a stall on all sorts of businesses and projects. Our office had an unprecedented number of permit applications. We've never seen the volume before, as well as associated large number of council meetings and public hearings to deal with the number of different planning and development related issues. My department personally lost 3 community planners, 2 who were poached by the private sector, and 1 who's coming back next month for was on parental leave. So for happy reasons, but still that has a big impact on the actual functioning of the office. The withdrawal of Selkirk from the planning district took up a lot of time, and then associated with that, from this past year, just the office relocation. So a lot of stuff going on that kind of put that project on the back burner, but we have restarted it back up, and we are aiming to get it done this year. So in order to accelerate this project, we changed the scope just a little bit. On the left column shows what the original approach a couple of years was going to be versus on the right column what the approach is going to be now. So when we originally proposed the project, we were going to update all the zoning bylaws. We were going to update all the building bylaws because they kind of have some overlaps there. We were going to update the templates that we use for our planning reports to council. We were going to update the templates we use for our public hearing notices. Right now, just to accelerate this project, we're just going to do the zoning bylaws. Working on the templates and the zoning and the building bylaws. If there's time in the year, at the end of the year, we're going to tackle them then. But for right now, we know it's a priority to get these zoning bylaws done from all of our municipalities. So we're going to get rocking on just that for right now. The scope is really unchanged. We're still going to take an approach that we're going to come up with a format or a document layout that can be replicated amongst all of the municipalities and use just common terminology for general requirements, definitions, those types of things. And what I really want to do is create a suite of different types of zones, whether they be from single family to multifamily to commercial, and almost have the municipalities tackle this as an a la carte type of a bylaw. We'll come up with a number of different zones, and then you choose the ones that only are going to be applicable and will be useful to your municipality. So, for example, you're going to have obviously some agricultural zones, whereas Denatur is not going to choose agricultural zones. You're going to have some business park, industrial types of zones, where some of the other municipalities may not choose those. East or West St. Paul might have some higher density residential, where you may not have some higher density residential. So we'll come up with that suite of zones, and you pick the ones that are going to help best implement your vision for your municipality. And then there are going to be some unique scenarios that are going to come up in each municipality where we might have to tailor make a zone for a unique scenario. For St. Andrews, you have the airport. That's a unique thing that none of the other municipalities have. Obviously, we're going to need a unique zone for just the airport. This only you're going to use. We've heard of some other things, Denatur, St. Clements, and I think probably St. Andrews as well. You have a unique scenario where you have some cottaging types of areas. That's a bit of a unique scenario for single family versus a suburban type of development, because you're dealing with water, you're dealing with vacationing types of areas. So we might have to come up with a tailor-made zone that tries to fit and accommodate those scenarios. Municipalities involved, obviously we've gone down from 6 to 5, so that reduces the workload somewhat. And in 2021, we were going to be reliant on a lot of in-person meetings, and I don't think we have the time to do that now. However, we can still do a lot of in-person meetings, and I think what I'm going to also follow up with the various different councils is handing out questionnaires, surveys, those types of things to get all your input, because you can do those, over a weekend, over a few days, kind of a thing, rather than having to wait for a few weeks for another scheduled council meeting, especially if it's a very simple topic or a very few simple answers we're looking for. Here's the estimated time and timelines for everything. We're currently in stage 1, just the project restart, where we're doing a bunch of background information and the research, where we're thinking this is going to take us about a couple of months. Drafting the actual new zones is going to take, we're guessing, about 3 months, which will take us to the end of June. And then finalizing those zones takes us to the end of summer, end of August there. With stage 4 being the adoption of the zoning bylaws. That's where each municipality will be adopting the actual bylaw itself, going through that process. Now, these are just sort of tentative estimates. Obviously, each municipality is going to have their own type of approach to their zoning bylaws. Some might require more hands-on versus others. So I can't give an actual, hard number on exactly how long this is going to take. We'll kind of know when we get into it, but we'll move pretty quick on this. Just to know that I had on the bottom there, just in case you've ever come across anyone that says, oh, we can do a perfect bylaw, we can do a perfect secondary plan, we can do perfect whatever. There's no such thing. I've been at this for a long time. There's no such thing as a perfect bylaw. Anyone who ever tries to sell you on that is probably just trying to get your cash. What we do intend to do is test this bylaw to the best of our abilities. We'll actually, once we have rules put in place, we'll give them to our plan checkers, to our building officers, the people that would actually be implementing the permits, and say, does this work? Are there some pitfalls here? Try and correct the scenarios before they actually be adopted as a bylaw. And then something I like to do with every kind of plan that we put forward, every kind of bylaw, whether it's a development plan or a zoning bylaw, is after about a year or about a season of building in this case, let's have a look at the bylaws and figure out what's working well and what's not working quite the way we wanted them to work. We're going to be going through that in the summer with our development plan. There's a bunch of policies in there that the board wanted because they were good ideas. We still think they're good ideas, but they're not exactly being implemented or interpreted the way we originally thought. So we're going to go in and tweak a few things. That's what we have proposed to do with your zoning bylaw, once we actually got a whole building season to go through. In terms of costs, well, the planning district's absorbing the cost. This is in our planning budget for this year. There's a huge cost savings for the municipalities by having the planning staff at the planning district do this. We will have to go to some outside consultants for some help on this, notably with our GIS mapping. There'll be new zoning maps we have to put into place. Our staff can do that, but the consultants that we have can do it faster and probably, if we took a full cost accounting, cheaper than what our staff could do it. As well as I want to get legal input from our planning lawyers on this, because these are legal documents. We want to make sure that we're covering everything off, and just from best practices, if they identify anything that might be an issue, like I've said again with the testing, let's identify problems at the start before we actually implement things. So what we've heard so far, what we've identified so far, as I said, this is a restart of a project. We've already done some research a couple of years ago. We're kind of topping it back up currently. What we found is that the zoning bylaws are not consistent at all, which doesn't mean a whole lot to municipalities individually, but it means a lot to the planning district and staff, because implementing 5 different zoning bylaws can be a challenge. It's also a challenge for the development community, because you have home builders that are building not just in St. Andrews, but in West St. Paul and St. Clements and East St. Paul. And I know they find it frustrating as well when they're dealing with a house design in one municipality that fits on a lot and fits all the requirements. Then they take that same thing and plunk it on a different lot, and whoops, sorry, it's a bit different. And what I mean by that is there's simple things like, where do you measure the setbacks from? Well, depending on the zone and depending on the municipality, sometimes it's the wall, sometimes it's the eave. Well, depends. That makes a big difference when you go to calculate if a permit can be issued or not. And as I said here, just on the screen, it adds for unnecessary misinterpretations and mistakes. Quite often, when I've been going through past variance applications, that's quite often where we see a lot of variance applications coming forward, because a builder has built one thing in one municipality that fits, and then they bring it to another municipality and go, sorry, we measure from the eave, not from the wall. And they go, well, it's the same exact thing. Yeah, no, it's not. So either got to shrink the house or go ask for a variance. Easiest thing is to go ask for a variance in their mind. So the existing zoning bylaws are incomplete. There are terms and definitions that are placed in bulk tables that aren't defined. A simple one is unit area. It's in the bulk tables. There's a number associated with buildings. How, what is the minimum size? What is the maximum size? But unit area isn't defined. So what does that mean? Well, we kind of got to go into the gray area and come up with our own interpretation. It'd be nice if it was just plainly defined. There's other terms that are in the definitions that are never used throughout the zoning bylaws. So there's those kinds of things that come up. There's a broad range of zones are needed to implement some of the secondary plans. Some of our municipalities have secondary plans that call for infill development or higher densities, like multifamily, but they only have one multifamily zone, or they don't have any standards to them, or they're trying to attract commercial types of ventures, but they only have neighborhood commercial, like corner store type of commercial zones. So they need new zones to be implemented. Either better or more design guidelines we're hearing need to be put into the zoning bylaws. What we're finding is that many of our municipalities are relying on development agreements through either rezoning applications or through subdivision applications to implement design guidelines. And that might have been okay in the past, but now under the new rules under the Planning Act with Bill 37, development agreements can be appealed to the municipal board. So you have a potential challenge every time you want to implement design guidelines for a specific developer through a development agreement. You could be challenged and have to go to the municipal board, or just put it in the zoning bylaw. Deal with it once. Once it's in the zoning bylaw, it's there. It's done. There's no more arguing about it. We've seen that work in many municipalities across Canada. And in fact, the input that we've gotten from the development community is not that they're against development design guidelines, but they sure would like to have them consistent amongst all municipalities and all builders within a municipality. So long as it's there, they can identify what the parameters are going to be from the get-go. They can work on their pro formas. They know what the cost is going to be. They can roll it in rather than taking a chance and not exactly knowing what they're going to be dealing with. into the future. Something as well that we've heard from some of our municipalities, as well as some of our residents, is that many of the zones allow for multiple land uses within one zone. So you don't exactly know what you're going to get. There are agriculture zones that will allow for institutional uses, churches, schools, that sort of thing. You'll see a church or school pop up, and the public goes, wait a second, I thought this is supposed to be for agriculture. Or you'll have residential zones for single family residential, and a neighborhood commercial is a permitted use, and all of a sudden a commercial venture pops up. They go, wait a second, I thought this was a single family residential zone. Yeah, well, it is, but that's also allowed. So we've heard from a lot of people, gee, it really would be nice if we could just know exactly what we're getting into. If we're dealing with single family, let's just have single family as the use. If we're dealing with commercial, let's just have commercial as the use. Let's separate these uses so everyone knows exactly what they're getting into at the end of the day. We are updating all the statistics. Right now, we've gone back to, we did 2016 to 2020. I want to add in 2021 so that we have two different cycles of different councils, as well as we have the pandemic stats in there. Something that I like to do is go through all the statistics on all the different applications to see if any patterns are emerging. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. But what I mean by that is, for example, I'll have a look at all the variance applications and then break it down by different types of variance applications. So we're seeing, a huge amount of variances for, let's say, the size of accessory buildings, detached garages. If requirement is 1,200 square feet, and you're constantly getting applications for 1,500 square feet, and you're always approving them, I'm going to ask the question, should we just up it to 1,500? Does that make sense? Or do you want to keep it where it's at? Just stuff like that. That's what I want to try and identify, if there's any patterns or things that we should be aware of. So. And then what we've heard so far, back in 2021, we had some discussions with the past councils, with land developers, with home developers, administration staff from all the different municipalities, as well as with our staff that use the bylaws. We wanted to get their input on what are some things that work well, what are some things that don't work well. We sort of tabulated those things, and that we're doing another round, obviously, because we have new councils. We want to hear from all of you, and some are new administrations. We want to hear from all of you. We're going around and doing that again, because you're all the ones that will be actually using the bylaws themselves. So what we've heard so far, and I've sort of I put these into categories and obviously summarize them. Some of them are very eloquent responses that I've received, so just for to be timely. There's some built form types of things that have come up. Some municipalities have said, hey, we're starting to see garages where we have two garages attached to a house, one on either side of the house. That's kind of weird. We don't want to see that. Some municipalities have said we don't like the idea of having two driveways, just one driveway per lot in residential areas, without rules there, then it becomes a question. Standardize the aesthetic regulations between the municipalities, those design guidelines, like to see those and just include some of those things. In terms of interpretation, I noted before, just standardize the terms and actually put definitions where you need definitions into the municipalities. Simplify commercial signage. This related a lot to Selkirk when they were part of the district. We had a number of pages, a number of different rules, and depending on who was reading it or if they had their coffee that morning or not, you could probably get a different interpretation of the rules because they were so complex. So simplifying things, making them user-friendly, so everyone can understand. And in terms of zones, as I said before, there's probably some more zones that need to be put in, dealing with special needs like cottage areas, that single land use per zone type of thinking. And then some of our municipalities need a broader range of residential densities so they can implement different things. We had a public hearing a couple months ago, And with one of our municipalities, and a developer was proposing a certain zone and said, yeah, we're gonna make those ones over there way bigger than the requirements. And we had a question from one of our counselors that said, well, what's the guarantee on that? Well, there's no guarantee on it. That was just a rezoning. You know, gonna zone it to this big of a lot, but trust me, we're gonna keep those lots over there really big. Okay, I guess we'll wait and see. You had a number of different zones to deal with a number of different lot sizes, then the applicant could have come forward, or council could have said, hey, come forward with a rezoning application with a couple or three different zones. You know, put your money where your mouth is, actually apply for what you're proposing, so. Bulk regulations, this has come up again and again. Houses on single family lots, should they be scaled? Should the size of the house versus the size of the lot, should there be a scaling thing going on there? Denotter's always challenged with this, where they have really small lots, lot widths, and because there's historical lots in that area. And kind of works okay, kind of doesn't work okay sometimes, where they say, if you want to build your house really tall, you got to have a wide lot. There's a certain aesthetic scale that we want here. We don't want that that sort of urban, you know, shadowing effect of houses onto the street. We've heard from the development community, allow more variance or flexibility with the bulk regulations. Not entirely sure how we do that right now. Under your zoning bylaws, you allow for what we call in-house variances. So if someone is within 10 or 15%, depending on the municipality, of the regulation, that the administration has the right to sign off approval on a variance. Quite often we'll get variances where a developer will come in and say, oops, we built the house, we know it's supposed to be 20 feet from the front setback and we're 19.98 feet. Can we have a variance? Yeah, we can sign that off in the office. So that's a way to have, I guess, more flexibility if council wants to give us that authority. Some other things that have come up, allowing for secondary suites, allowing for different kinds of home-based businesses. Shipping containers is always a hot topic. Should they be allowed? Yes or no? If yes, in certain areas, under what circumstances? And then another one that's come up that we've heard as well is rezoning land that's in property zone right now. So land where whatever's happening on the ground has the wrong zone. If there's a gas station happening on the land, let's zone it as commercial and not as agricultural, those types of things. Some of our municipalities have also talked about something called pre-zoning. So where the land is designated and planned for future development, and they put the pipes in the ground and they want to see higher density, just zone the land. Council will just do that rather than having applicants come forward. So that's a discussion we can have in the coming months. What I did want to talk to you today about is get some input from you. And I know I'm putting you all a bit on the spot. I know we don't have the mayor here, so we don't have someone here, but like I said, perhaps what I'll do is I will send a questionnaire through your administration that maybe you can have a look at, and you can you know, kind of fill out your answers and send them on back to me, so you don't feel too pressured and you're the gun. Some of these are a little bit more to chew on. One is to have to do with project consultation. Now, obviously, we're going to be doing lots with the municipality. That's going to continue on throughout the process. We'll be speaking to you as council throughout the process and have regular conversation with your administration. We're going to be continued consultation with the users of the zoning bylaws. So our staff, your staff, as well as the development community. We have already spoken to the development community. We're probably going to speak to them again when we get to the stage of having a draft zoning bylaw, so we can get their reaction of what they think will work and what they think won't work for technical kinds of things. What I don't know, and each municipality is going to be different on this, is how much public consultation you would like to do. And I will say, just as a caveat, public consultation is going to be at your cost, because each municipality is going to want a different level of it. What I would give you to sort of chew on is that a zoning bylaw is a technical implementation tool. it's not the document or the process to start planning out your community. That's the development plan and that's secondary plans. That absolutely, you need people, the public, the ratepayers, the property owners, your residents involved from the get-go. Trying to identify what's the vision of how you want your community to develop. You've already done that to some degree. That's already been done through the development plan. This is an implementation tool. This is about, the development plan says you can develop commercial over there, so let's make sure we have the right commercial zones to allow for that kind of development. Now, I think the public has to be involved, and I think they'll have some good input. But I'll leave it up to you maybe to wrestle with and get back to me as to how much and how often and where in the process you want them to be involved. And I'm of course available to answer any questions on that and kind of work that through with you. But like I said, this is a technical type of a document. What I've seen in the past is including the public too much is not always to the benefit of everyone. If you want to include the public, which I think you should, let's be very clear on what our expectations from them are. If you go out and just say, we want your input on everything, you're going to get their input on everything. And at the end of the day, like I said, this is not about the vision for the community. And I don't want people to be misled on that. So if we ask them key questions about sort of pressing issues, I'll use the detached garage size again. You know, hey, what have you seen in your neighborhood that works really well? What are the problems you've seen with detached garages? That kind of input, I think, is probably good. But whether or not their neighborhood should be residential or not, that's not the appropriate question or the appropriate time. So if that makes sense. Any questions on that? Sure. Any input? Not yet. Fair enough.
There, the vet.
There's a few other questions or topics I want to take you through, and again, I'm going to send this all through your administration and sort of questionnaires for you to wrestle with this, because these are not easy things. Secondary suites. So I think probably most of you are familiar. Secondary suites are another residential unit that you find on a single family residential lot. They can either be attached to the house or they can be in a detached unit. When they're attached to the house, especially from the get-go, you can walk up and down a street and you'd be pretty hard pressed to point out which one has a secondary suite. In fact, a few years ago, we played a game. I made council play a game in East St. Paul. I had a bunch of photos and I said, can you tell me which one of these houses has a secondary suite? And they were wrong in every guess, right? Because the point of them is that the neighborhood still looks like a single family dwelling neighborhood. The secondary suite, when they're attached, you shouldn't really know that they're there. They don't operate as like a duplex or anything else. When they are separate in a separate building, yeah, you can see those. And you see those in very urban places, laneway housing in Vancouver and that kind of stuff. So something I want you to think about is, do you want to allow secondary suites in your municipality? Are there some areas where you think it would work, or some areas that you don't think it would work? Should they be attached or detached, or do you care? Could they be both? Should they just be outright permitted, or do you think they need to come to council for some input? The other thing I want you to put some thought towards, very similarly, are what you call garden suites in your current zoning bylaw. So garden suites were put into your zoning bylaws, let's say St. Andrews, West St. Paul, actually St. Clements, way back when the zoning bylaws were originally created, as a means to have a second dwelling unit on the property. And at that time, it was supposed to be only for family members. Only for family members that maybe need a little help or assistance. You want to move your parents onto the property because you need to care for them a little bit more, great. You want to move onto your parents' property so you can care for them, fine. That sounds really good. We've seen a number of problems with secondary suites though. They're supposed to be as a temporary solution to a temporary type of mom or dad needs some help, I'm gonna live there on the property until they're no longer with us or they decide to move on to something else. And at that time, the secondary suite is supposed to be taken off the property. That's incredibly hard to enforce. Because no one is in our office and no one in your office is ever notified when someone sells the property. Or when mom and dad all of a sudden move out. And what you end up finding quite often is lots of calls to bylaw enforcement saying, there was a secondary suite, or sorry, a garden suite on this property approved like 10 years ago, and I'm pretty sure they're just renting it out to whoever now. So it becomes an enforcement issue that's really hard to enforce and identify. The other thing is that the language in the current zoning bylaws talks about it's supposed to be for family members. That's now a constitutional no-no. You can't identify who it's for. And actually in the Planning Act, you cannot identify, you can have all sorts of rules around land use, but not tenure. You can't talk about tenure. You can't talk about if it's gonna be ownership or rental by whom. That's just a no-fly zone for council. So I would almost suggest that we just get rid of secondary suites, but we talk more about just garden suites, and we talk more about secondary suites. Because what we've also found too with the garden suites is someone's going to invest a lot of money bringing an RTM onto the property or building something on the property with a temporary foundation. And at the end of the day, they don't want to get rid of it because they've spent a lot of money. They've probably got a mortgage or loan on it, that sort of thing. And once again, it becomes something that's difficult to enforce later on. So something else to think about. Another topic is building setbacks and projections. So currently we have 5 different zoning bylaws, and depending on the type of development and the zone or the municipality, setbacks are measured either from the building wall or the furthest projection or who knows what, everything in between. In fact, East St. Paul has both, depending on what zone you want to be in. Sometimes it's from the eave and sometimes it's from the wall. So it makes it really confusing for everyone invested in it. So some things for you to think about. Do you have any current concerns with building setbacks? Are you hearing anything from the community? Are they too close? Are they too far away? Are you hearing or seeing problems in your suburban urban areas versus your rural areas? Do you have any ideas of what minimum distances should be? Should be different for different kinds of setbacks or different areas, urban versus rural, front versus side. And if you have ideas about these different things and you have actual numbers, you say, Derek, I think 20 feet makes a whole lot of sense, or whatever it is, that's great. If you don't have a clue, if you're like me and can stand and look at something and can't scale it for the life of you, but just eyeballing it, just say, I think there should be enough room on a driveway for 2 cars back to back. Give me that kind of information as well. Whatever qualitative information you give me, I can work with that as well. That's sometimes a better mark than just saying, 20 feet is good. So, and then the last thing is, what are your thoughts on scaling building heights setbacks? This has become an issue, especially in emerging suburban urban areas. I'm thinking it's more West St. Paul and East St. Paul. But St. Andrews might see this as well sometime in the future. You might as well get ahead of these issues. Does it matter to you how tall a building is versus how far away it is from a setback or from a property line? Right now, all your zones will say for residential, you can go 35 feet, it's 2.5 stories, 3 stories-ish, depending on the roof design. And one of your zones will say 10 feet. Well, it doesn't matter if you build a bungalow or if you build a 2-story house, it's still 10 feet. Should that be scaled differently? Just put some thought towards that. Likewise, if you've ever been in any other communities, Manitoba, across country, in the States, where you've said, I was at this place and I really like the look and the feel of that development. It seemed to be really scaled nicely. Give me the name of that place. I'll look it up. I'll see what's kind of, try and get to the bottom of what's working, what's not working. Similar if you have horror stories, good God, I don't know what the answer is, but I don't want to look like this. Give me that information too. Home-based businesses, these come up quite often in our office. They come to council every once in a while. So home-based businesses, secondary activities to the residential property. For the most part, home-based businesses are supposed to be fairly benign on the property. You know, it's something that takes place within the house. It's typically the employees are the people that live in the house. It's usually businesses that you don't have a whole lot of traffic or anything like that. Maybe it's like a hairdresser or a chiropractor or an accountant, something that's very low traffic in the neighborhood. Put some thought towards, do you still want to allow for these things? Are there different kinds of parameters you want to place on them? Should they just be outright permitted, or do you want to see everything come to council in conditional use? The other thing that St. Andrews does allow for, which is unique, well, you along with St. Clements, is you allow for home industries. These are a little more intrusive. These types of businesses on properties, we typically see them in rural areas, and they might have a couple of employees show up. You might have a small mechanic shop or something like that. It might take place in a building that's separate from the house. The big thing is that they can typically have some employees, and they will typically see some traffic from customers. So once again, put some thoughts towards those. Sometimes they've turned out to be really great for the municipalities. I always thought of them almost like a business incubator, you know, like if you're doing really well and so you get a good business with your little tiny machine shop business on your property and you start to get real successful, off to the business park now, right? Sometimes they turn out to be absolute nightmares for your residents and for your bylaw enforcement. So once again, if you have some thoughts on those, I'd love to hear them. If you have success stories, let me know about those. If you have nightmare stories about some of these, let me hear about those too, okay? And we can maybe like sift through and get to the bottom of what's working, what's not working in different areas. So. And then pre-zoning properties, I talked about this a little bit. There might be some areas that we can identify in St. Andrews where the development plan has already identified that this is an area for future development, but it's maybe zoned currently as agriculture. Do you want to make the property owners go through that process of rezoning it? Or do you just want to take care of it as part of this whole process? There's pros and cons to those. When you're dealing with single family developments, maybe that's an okay approach to take, especially if you were trying to do an economic development type of initiative. But for things like commercial, things like multifamily development, rezoning might be the only opportunity that you get to weigh in on that and add conditions or hear from the public that might have some concerns, especially nuisance types of concerns, where you could add conditions. Once a property is zoned, that's it. So in terms of multifamily, if you have a developer that says, yeah, I'm gonna develop this, it's gonna have some townhouses and some apartments, and we're gonna subdivide it, these different areas, we're gonna come back to you for sure. There's no guarantee they have to come back to you. They only have to come back to you if they want to create a bunch of additional titles. But you can also create a multifamily development that's all rental on one title. That's completely legal too. They came into my office after the property zone and said, Derek, here's my application for a permit. I'd be obligated to give it to them. You'd lose an opportunity to weigh in on if that's the right zone or if there's any conditions that you feel you might need to attach to an approval. Same with commercial areas. So there's pros and cons to that. And if we identify some properties together, maybe we can work through some of those pros and cons. So I know St. Andrews has talked about that for some of their areas where they've already put the pipes in the ground for sewer and stuff, and they're like, we don't want to see 100 applications for people to split their land in half. That's exactly what we want to do. Let's just rezone that whole area. It's only going to be single family. We're like, okay, that makes sense for that. But they have identified some areas for multifamily, and it's kind of like, we want to just, reserve our right just in case we get out of condition of approval. So that's all I have for topics at this time, unless as council, you have anything that's been burning at the top of your mind on this? I know this is a lot to kind of throw at you.
They're complex things.
They're very complex, yeah.
Question, in terms of when you said rezoning agriculture land for future development, obviously that's in consultation with the owner of the land. So if you designate, we'd like to see some development of residential areas and rezone that agriculture, like how do you know that there's going to be actual buy-in or that they actually even want to sell? Like obviously you have to make that connection with the landowner to even go that route.
Absolutely. So it's a yes and no kind of answer. So under the Planning Act, you as council have the right to rezone land however you want. You don't have to tell the landowner if you don't want to. I would not recommend ever taking that approach. If there's land that's been identified in the master plans for future development and it's still zoned as agriculture, and you thought that might be a good idea just to pre-zone it, I would absolutely recommend that we talk to that landowner. Because maybe they don't want to do it right now, or maybe their business plan is to sell the property to somebody else who might pick a different zone or a different suite of different zones for that property. If it's agriculture at the moment and their ideas for the next 5 years, I just want to keep clearing the hay off of this and selling that, and then my kids are gonna sell the property. If you rezone it to residential, you might take away some property rights that they already have that they were banking on. So if we identify some properties together where we think that might make sense, absolutely, I would recommend we go talk to the property owner and say, are you even wanting to go through with this? Right. Yeah. Anything else? No?
Lots to find.
Lots to ponder. Like I said, I'm going to send you sort of those list of topics and questions that you can think about and ponder, and at any time you can always contact me. So in terms of next steps, I'm going to send you these questions. We in our office are going to be finishing up our statistical analysis on those past applications, see if we can identify any patterns, any things that raise questions that we want to bring to you about, like that scenario. Are you always approved? Do you have like 100 of these applications and you're always approving them? Should we just change the rule? Those kinds of things. So we'll send you those as well as we complete those things. And our next formal meeting I'd like to have face to face is when we actually have the results from our background research done. So we can share all those results and say, this is what we think it means. How would you like to move forward? And what we're also going to do as part of our background research is my staff right now are trying to identify some best planning practices from other places. I don't know a whole lot of planners that start everything from scratch and do it in isolation. We always look to see who's done it better, or who has a better solution to something, as well as who's done it not so well. Are we going down that path? So they're looking at some other municipalities across Canada that have similar characteristics to our municipalities. Some that are rural, some that are have some emerging suburban areas, some that are dealing with growth, those types of things, and seeing what we can glean from their experiences. So I always remember that saying, I can't remember who said it, but succeed, you have to learn from your mistakes, but they're truly successful, learn from others. So that's what we're trying to do. We'll bring all that forward in terms of best planning practices from some of these topics that we brought up. So you have the benefit of that. There's going to be lots of opportunities for us to talk. And really, this is your zoning bylaw. So if you want to meet with me more, I'm happy to come and meet with you more. You want to say, Derek was sick of seeing you, go away, I'll go away, whatever you want. At the end of the day, our office is going to try our best to come up with a technical document that's going to serve you well. But you have to be comfortable with it because it's your zoning bylaw. So if at any point you have questions, you have concerns, give me a shout. I'm happy to come and sit in front of you, or even if it's a simple thing, send me an individual one as well, or through your administration. However, that arrangement is best had. So, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
So you'll be sending the information over to
Yes.
distribute? Okay.
Yeah, I will do
I've
that.
got some comments and questions.
Sure.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot for the presentation there, Derek. It's been, we've heard lots of these. I'll start off with, first of all, Justin's question there about, expanding. I guess the purpose of changing farmland to residential is to expand settlement areas. And that was, for instance, was done in Clandeboye years ago, adjacent to Schindler subdivision there, because the settlement area is full now in Clandeboye. I'm using that as an example. So when we redo the development plan, that land is recognized in there as switched to residential. It still needs to go through the zoning process if the RM chooses to do it, or if the landowner chooses to do it at that time. Another instance is along Netley Creek. There's a piece of land that in the last development plan rezoned it to SR. It was agriculture. And we just had a situation a year ago or 2 years ago where the landowner had to rezone it because we hadn't done it yet. So you're right. We should be proactive in doing these rezonings to match up to the area or match up to what our future plans are in settlement areas and so forth. The other thing you had mentioned, Derek, was no particular order here, was setback and heights. That's something that needs to be looked at. Additional dwelling. We had one last week there for a garage from 15 feet to 17'8". It was. The house is well over 20 feet, and we're restricting a garage to 17 to like 15 feet. Those heights have to be relooked at in the areas and some leeways on those. What else did I have here? You're right on the best planning practices. I know, Derek, we've been in your office a few times over the past probably 5 or 6 years with Netley Colony. The way they're zoned is agriculture. You talked about a church. When they rebuilt their church, they had to provide 90 parking spots for it. There's nobody parking at that church. They just did a new production facility, 70,000 square feet. They needed 100 parking spots for that. So there's been talk when we've talked to Jennifer and yourself, I think was in those meetings, about, again, best practices. There's other colonies, St. Clements has one, and other colonies across Manitoba and Canada. Like, what zonings do they have? Because 3-4 years ago, they come for a conditional use for more residents because according to the A80, you only allowed one resident on that title. There's over 100 people living there, I believe now. So that needs to be looked at. Your garden suites versus secondary suites. We had one of them a while ago. We took that condition out of removing the garden suite. I called it a circle of life. You have these people that are taking care of their elders or elders, vice versa, in whichever home. We took that condition out of the last one that we did of a garden suite because it is a circle of life. And it doesn't matter whether there's an aunt or a cousin or whoever living in there. And I think secondary suites should be allowed anyway with the economy these days and on and on and on. Maybe there is a need for a little bit more income for some people. So that should be looked at and again, see what other areas are doing and best practices. The other thing, does this zoning bylaw have anything to do with fees? Like I've asked this question several times and I don't agree with the answer on it. Say a variance, if you need a variance for frontage, now use this as an example, you have 1,000 square feet or 1,000 feet of frontage, you allow 200 feet of frontage, so that would give you 5 lots. Now the developer, the landowner applies for a variance to reduce it from 5 lots to 6 lots. So it goes from 200 foot frontage to 166 foot frontage. If you had a variance for land, for a variance for a building too close to the property line, that's $600. The variance for this is close to $2,000. And to me, it's the same It's the same notification, the same mail outs, the same work as the planning board. But the reason I was given for this charge is because now they're developing 6 lots and they can afford it. I don't think that's a proper answer. If you're going to charge those fees, you should come up with a good reason for it, you know. To me, 200 feet to 166 feet isn't a big deal. Then that comes down to changing the 10% variance too, like what you can do in-house. So, you know, 16 feet is on 166 feet. If you went to 15%, that's 25 feet. So you're right on all of those things that you're talking about needs to be looked at, you know, setbacks and in-house variances. And but I think it's a very good start, and we can surely add to this. When's the next time the development plan is looked at? I know probably 3 or 4 years ago we redid the development plan.
We just adopted it in 2020.
In 2020, yeah, so 3 years ago. So, and that is supposed to be every 5 years, but it doesn't seem to work out at that. So, you know, sometimes the zoning bylaw can complement the development plan as well, as to get ready for when the development plan comes around again. We're ready for it, right? So sometimes these both documents go hand in hand, correct?
Yeah, in an ideal world, I would have a ton of staff and a ton of funding that we could work on all these documents all at the same time. But just
Yeah.
not the reality.
Like they're a living document, right? So it's always work in progress on them, and what we change is what we encounter over the years. You know, what works and what needs to be changed on it. But like I say, good work on it, and I think it's a really good start. Thank you for that.
Just on the developments plan, like I said at the start of this, there is a project where we are taking a look at the development plan just to tweak a few policies that aren't working quite the way we want them to, as well to actually take out some policies that were required by the province that don't make sense, that they can't even tell me what it means. So we're getting rid of those things. If there are areas in the municipality that you think need to be redesignated, tell me now, because Councillor Hunt, as you said, sometimes these processes kind of work hand in hand. And if you're thinking the market or the realities have changed in a few areas, let me know about that now, because maybe there's something we can include in that tweaking of the development plan, as well as that can be addressed in the zoning bylaw. And hopefully when those are both approved, they kind of come through at about the same time. St. Clements, for example, I know there are some areas that were in the development plan as, I believe, rural residential, and now there is a sewer pipe going down the road. So maybe that needs to be tweaked in the development plan, and maybe there's some new zones that they need in their zoning bylaw to facilitate that new market reality that we're seeing. Things are different now than they were 4 years ago, right? So yeah, if you're reading things like that, don't be shy of letting me know. I'll let you know if I can put it into the zoning bylaw or not, or if there's a different process we need to go through. But please let me know of your concerns, your issues, your opportunities that you can identify. And Councillor Hutt, thanks for again for reminding me of the Netley Colony. That's one of those unique scenarios where we probably need to come up with a unique zone just for that kind of scenario, where no one else is going to use it except for St. Andrews and probably St. Clements. So, yeah.
Right, but go back to your best practices, like you say. There's colonies all across Manitoba. You know, around Cartier area, there's dozens of them around that area, and Assiniboine River area, and they're all in the same zoning. You know, like they all have the same principle: multi-family on A80 land, and most have manufacturing on site and don't require parking spots. And like I say, the church was one that, you know, required 70 parking spots for a church that it didn't even have a driveway to it. It was in the middle of the development of the residential area. So thanks, Derek.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Council. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you need from me while I'm here, not necessarily related to this?
Anyone? No.
No.
Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Hunt. Excellent comments.
Right.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you very much.
Yes, at this point in time, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory. the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota people. We acknowledge that this is the birthplace of the Métis Nation. We respect the spirit and the intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration.
Thanks, Councilor Murray. Okay, and agenda item number 4, management reports. Finance update by Scott Scammell.
So I provided a financial statement for the month of January 2023. It includes a summary statement and the detailed statement as well. The summary statement along the side, I've added some comments for some of the variations. You'll notice that this statement is a comparison of the 2023 and 2022 actuals. So that is the comparison I've done at this time until we have budgets, and then the budgets will be placed in place of the 2022 actual numbers. So just a couple of very quick highlights, and then I'll field some questions. The statements are fairly quiet for the month of January. There really was no big purchases, nothing really major to report. Most of the differences related between 2023 and 2022 are really timing differences of invoices. One thing that is different this year as compared to 2022, that's a slighter, larger item to highlight, is that the interest that we're earning, the revenue that we're earning on our cash is greater this year. And that's really because of the increase in the inflation rate. Last month it was 4.6%, and that was on a savings account, so it did quite well. I don't expect that will continue, as I recently heard in the news that the interest rates are starting to drop slightly. So I'll just share that with you as well. And that's really the big items that I want to mention for you guys. So if you do have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them now. And if I can't answer them now, I'll certainly get you an answer later.
Any questions for Mr. Scammell?
I just have one, but I'm not an accountant, so please forgive me if this isn't right. So in January, you gave us the report up to September 2022 for the financial reconciliation. Is that the correct word, or?
Yep.
So how do we get to January's numbers when we haven't seen October, November, December? What am I missing?
So 2 separate fiscal years. Reporting on January can happen, even though the third quarter or the final quarter of 2022 has not been reported on yet, because they're 2 separate. There's a cutoff, a specific cutoff for that. And I'll just note, now that you brought that up, that the fourth quarter reporting is coming. And I've got it planned for the March cow. And one of the processes that happens with the fourth quarter is there's a lot more of a detailed review. There's year-end rollovers. There's a review of cross our fingers, there'd be a surplus at the end of the year. And that surplus will get allocated to reserves. So there's more of a review that's required for that. And Brent and I will do that review together and offer some recommendations. So that piece will come in March.
Okay, so you said something about we went up here because of cash in the bank and the
Interest rate, yeah.
So what delegates cash in the bank? Like, we still don't, if I recall a previous meeting when I'd asked the question, the gas tax money, we don't have that. And you had stated that that we don't have it, we're not getting any interest on that. So what delegates cash in the bank?
So If I understand your question correctly, generally speaking, it's the reserves. So money that we've set aside from previous surpluses has accumulated and been allocated to reserve. And that money is still sitting in the bank now. So as an example, every year, you mentioned the gas tax, every year we do get the gas tax dollars. And if it's not all spent, then some of that unspent money will stay in the bank and stay in the reserve. And that accumulates. So as the surplus accumulated, and it's accumulated over many, many, many years, it's allocated to the various reserves and then tracked that way.
Okay, so one more question. So the 2020 audit came back stating we were $8 million in the hole because reserve money had been moved to do whatever. I think I kind of got my mind wrapped around that now.
Okay. When you're ready, I'll help you with that comment just a little bit.
So how do we have reserve money if we don't have all the audits done? Like if that audit says we were 8 million out, and that's 2020, now we're at the end of 2022, say.
Mhm.
Where's, like, how do we have money in it?
So I'll answer that question in two parts. There's a slight misconception with regards to, it was roughly $8.8 million. So what we had a line of credit with the Toronto Dominion Bank, and the Toronto Dominion Bank line of credit was $8.8 million. And that was money for the project, the wastewater project. So what we did was we transferred that line of credit over to the RM's general bank, Sonova. So we now have a line of credit with $8.8 million that we transferred from TD to Sonova. Now, what happens is the way the line of credit works is when you pay a bill, you only use your line of credit when you no longer have cash in the bank. So we paid the bill to the TD, and that transferred the line of credit over. So even though we didn't, in theory, have the money at that time, we still had the line of credit. So it was it equaled out. So the net cash position for the RM as a whole did not change. We had a line of credit in one place, one bank, we moved it to the other. So under the umbrella of the RM, it did not change. So I hope that answers that first part of that question. The second part of that question is that project completed. And when that project completed, the final reporting that went to the province for the debenture was completed. The debenture got started and the cash was returned to the RM. The same borrowed amount of money, whether it was the TD Bank or the Sonova, that cash came back. So that cash came back in 2021 when the project completed and the debenture was finalized.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to report? Or is there anything, any attachments?
Yes.
Everything good?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You have some dates, right?
Oh, yeah. In the next point on the, pardon me, I do have one other item to report before we move to my management report as well. And that is, and did it get attached to the agenda? I've got some tentative dates for us to do the financial plan. And I don't know if that got added to the agenda or not.
It looks like we got it.
Let me just pull that up on the screen here. So I've discussed this with Brent, and these are some dates for the financial plan and completing the financial plan. And it takes into consideration the province's guidelines for due dates for various activities. And the main activity is the financial plan hearing and the publication of it. So taking those dates into consideration and the date that the financial plan is due to the province of May the 15th, would work backwards. And tentatively, the dates will be April 25th for the tax levy bylaw first reading. And then May 8th for the financial plan hearing. And then on May the 9th, second and third reading of the financial plan. And then right after that, second and third reading of the tax bylaw. That's a very similar process to what we had last year. And those dates match up with your tentative May date for your first regular council meeting in May. So along with that, I would like to, Brent and I would like to have a couple meetings with you to go through. I think we should have at least 2 meetings to go through the preliminary budgets. So the first draft would be possibly May 9th or 10th, and that will coincide with Brent's vacation plans as well. And then the second date would be March. Yeah, sorry, what did I say? Sorry, March 9th or 10th. Apologies. And then the second would be April the 5th for the second review.
It would probably be March 9th, the Thursday. 10th is the Fridays.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So March 9th is the first review.
Yes. And then the second review is, and these are subject to change, but you know, we're polling you too if you're available. Would be April 5th, so that's a Wednesday. And because the April 6th is before Good Fridays. We're gonna do it on a Thursday and a Wednesday in the evening.
April 5th, I believe there is a A&M conference going on.
Okay.
And April 6th, St. Andrews hosts the dinner.
Okay, so let's get in your books for the March 9th meeting.
Mhm.
So let's book that, and then we'll go back to the drawing board and come up with a second meeting.
April 5th may work, all depending on the time that it's over, because I think last time it was over a little bit earlier, like at 2 in the afternoon. So I'm not sure whether anyone wants
We'll have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions for Tim? Before we move on to the next item? No? Item 4.2, the monthly progress reports for January 2023. Oh, before we go forward with that, can we, I think there was an RFP here for a resolution for these dates. Is that gonna go on to the next council meeting then?
Correct. It will go to the next council meeting. Yeah.
So we are at monthly reports. Anything about the monthly reports that we can ask?
Oh,
Jim, Tim?
that's where everybody gave that lovely.
Mhm.
We can, and not everybody's here, so we
Yeah.
could take, you know, if you have questions, we could take it back to the.
Okay. Okay, you have a question?
I have a few.
Oh, you have a feeling, okay.
And after the lovely reasons here, so let's get started. I recall when I first went, reading something about the Lockport Streetscape plan. Yes, I can tell you that I've heard of that. I can't remember what it is. Could you refresh my mind?
Actually, the request for proposal just closed for that. We had applied for a grant
Mhm.
that we received through Active Transportation Canada. We received a $50,000 grant to have a concept plan prepared for a pathways and a streetscape design from the St. Andrews Lock and Dam Bridge to the Highway 9, where we have an existing AT path there. So this is gonna run on the north side of Highway 44, along from the bridge, along Skinner's and there. And so We are in the process, the request for proposal closed the end of January. The review committee has looked at it. We're in the process. It will be coming to council next week to award it. And then from there, that consultant will be preparing a concept plan to kind of outline what path and streetscape will look like.
Okay. You had on your thing, I love your report, by the way. What's the draft of agreement of the Convoy Fire Department net and column? What's that about?
The Netley Colony has a fire hydrant for their facility. They have been in discussion with the Clandeboye Fire Department, so what they're looking to have is a kind of a sharing agreement or a use and sharing agreement put together. So that is being prepared by one of the RM's legal. And it's just going to outline that the Clandeboye Fire Department will have use of this fire hydrant at the colony whenever need be, as well as some training purposes. So the agreement just outlines the terms for all that use.
No, not costing us anything.
Not that I'm aware of right now, no.
And my other question, I think maybe Kim knows, I don't know though. I noticed on the rec plan, the master plan, it says it started in 2021. How come we don't have anything? What am I missing in this lovely plot?
You mean the actual report itself?
Well, it says that we requested and started the rec master plan in August of 2021, and we're hoping to get it, I think you had March 2023.
That's in Teresa's report?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably, let me just go back to that.
This is the thing that we're paying $143,000 for.
Yeah, let me go back to it.
I'm just curious.
That where it says air conditioning. At the top of Teresa's report there.
Yeah. What happened from 2 years? Was it COVID?
Your worship, it is part, is to help everybody out while they're looking. There's been 3 things added to the rec master plan in the year 2022.
Oh, what were those?
Petersfield Trail was not there when you started it, was one. There's been a change of your trail coming down number 9, which changed the plan. So there's been 3 changes to the plan, just in the process of developing the plan. As soon as you do that, that affects the planning process. So the planning process got extended a little bit further. Then you add the end of, at the beginning of 21, we're still in COVID, that consumes time. You can't do it in isolation in a room in Winnipeg. So, but there's been 3, actually, since I started in December, there's been 2 additions to the plan. When we start the one that Lisa's working on, which is also an adjustment to the plan. That's the trail that'll go from the bridge to number 9.
Yeah.
So all those become adjustments to the plan. And target wise, it seems a little long, but when you add in almost a year of COVID and then the additions, time wise is not as bad as it seems.
I did not realize trails were part. I'm thinking recreation and like give me an arena, a soccer field, all that kind of stuff, not a trail.
And also remember that it started out as a recreation master plan. You added in the trail master plan, which was a big addition, and that started in 2022.
I didn't realize that was like this, but thank you.
And I do see that Teresa does have noted that March 2023 is when she expects it to complete. So
Mhm.
that's a helpful.
I was happy to see that.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you, everybody.
No other questions? Everybody's satisfied with that? Okay, move to,
I got a comment on one of the managers' report there, or can add addition to it. Under leases there, under future activities, there was, always comment about daycare. that we missed the last intake, but you know, we have to do a study. We need to get this involved. I had sent an email to Lisa there on December 14th, and I believe we had it on December 19th, but we need to identify a piece of land that we're going to give 15 years of free rent that has all services. We need to do a study of daycares in a municipality and the waiting list on them. So just for knowledge, there was 2 phases released already. One phase, phase 1 had 665 spots, was 9 RMs. The second phase was 14 RMs with 1,004 spaces, totaling 670. And I'll email you the other reports. They're looking at to provide 23,000 spaces by the year 2026. So we need to get our ducks in a row of what land we're going to give for the 15 years, as well as history, because in their reports, they call a lot of these RMs have daycare deserts. They don't even have daycare in their municipality, or maybe not even the neighboring municipalities. So I'll send you the list of the 14 that were on the second intake, and you'll see they're a long ways away out of the catchment area and that. So if we can get working on that and identify a piece of land and get the information that we need to promote and why we need daycare, we need to know the waiting lists of the current daycares we have now. So maybe we form an ad hoc committee on that with a couple of councillors and the economic development officer, and get this in the queue. These you know, RMs that have been in phase 1 and phase 2 have probably been on the province's lists for 5 years or more. So we will get one. Like I say, there's 23,000 spaces be given out by 2026. So there's only been 1,670 approved now. So a long ways to go, and kudos to the province for coming up with this. Like, it's called Early Learning and Childcare is what the program is, and on a ready to move basis. So they're constructing these homes or these buildings, moving them on site, and so that's the beauty of it. It's going to be very, very quick. Once it's announced, the ones that were announced in November, they're going to be up and running by September, and the ones were just announced a few weeks ago, they should be up and running by the middle of next year. So let's get going on that and add it to that under the economic development officer's line of future activities. So,
Councillor Hunt, you're saying that this is that daycare in a box, correct?
correct. Yeah. Daycare in a box, ready to move. And I had sent us all the information on December the 14th, and I forwarded it. And like I say, it's just that you just can't put an application and say we're interested. We have to have the information to back it up and why we need it. You know, so we need a little bit of history of the waiting list in the ones that we have. There's one that, like, obviously St. Andrew's School, Lockport School. I don't know what other ones. So these are also non-for-profit daycares too. So it doesn't include the private ones. So so we need to know those numbers, but foremost, we need a piece of land that we can provide 15 years of maintenance on it, and it needs the water and sewer. So like I said, with this subdivision coming in Lockport, that'd be one to have the developer, you know, release some land or donate land, and hopefully with the water study coming along, that'll be another service that we need to provide that land. And so that's our input into the project, is 15 years of rent-free and the services. So, and we have to clean the snow and do the yard maintenance. So, but the biggest thing is identifying a piece of land and also identifying the need for it in St. Andrews with the information to back it up of what the waiting lists are and what ones that we have in place now. So, thank you.
I was going to invite John Cuban, who has a program for the daycares, and have
That's what he's talking about.
yeah, speak to council.
Yeah.
So they've done a whole number of them already, and they're project managers. They act as a project manager for RMs.
Right. Yeah. But I'll forward the last email. There was just one release just yesterday, I think, from Minister Owatsko, and for the new ones that were released, and also, like I say, the commitment of 23,000 spaces by the year 2026. That's quite a big hill to climb, I believe. You know, 23,000 spots to go in 3 years, but good for them if that's what they're putting it's a high hill to climb, but good for them, and let's help them do it. So.
So Councillor Hunt, was there a deadline that was had passed at one point in time in January? Is there another one that's coming up that we need to be? proactive on?
Nothing has been released yet, but like I say, that deadline in January was already filled with the previous applicants from phase one, and they've been on that waiting list. Like I say, if you go back in the list, that got it, there was Arm of Morris, Arm of Whitemouth, Arm of Headingley, Arm of Portage La Prairie, Peguis First Nations, so the ones released in the second one: Morris, Melita, Dauphin, Morden, Lake St. Martin First Nations, Norway House, Cree Nation, Municipality of Hanover over by Steinbach, RM of Argyle Boulder. So these are all RMs that are away from the city, and like I say, the provinces, emphasize these are called daycare deserts, where they don't even have a daycare facility in their municipality. So, but let's get that information gathered up and be ready for the next intake. So
one of the good things is we're not on the bleeding edge here, that we can go and look when they actually physically have them out there, that we can go and see what they look like and how they operate. So,
yeah,
that's I think a good field trip for council to go on and actually see.
Yeah, and the beauty about the RTM part of it is there's, I believe, 3 different sizes of buildings. So there's, say, A, B, and C. So whatever your needs are, and like I say, hopefully they always, oversize it for your community, because it's, daycare spots are never going to go down in need. They're always going to go up. So hopefully they have certain sizes of buildings that they can put up. There's 3 different sizes for whatever the needs of the community is. And that's the beauty of it. They can be expanded, and I believe they can be expanded in the future as well with the design of them. So,
there's a desperate need for childcare spaces here, so it's a great idea.
Then let's get that evidence out there, and then we have it. And like I say, but Paramount is the piece of land that it would go on. So,
some event we attended, St. Clements has one, and it's opening up this fall.
Okay.
So we could always maybe go and have a look at this.
Okay. We need to do some due diligence and get this thing rolling right away, so we can don't miss the next concern. So
yeah, I just wanted to add it to someplace, and I see in Lisa's that's kind of falls under economic development and under the future activities. So, like I say, I don't want it falling off of the map. So,
thanks, Larry. 4.3 animal control report. Everyone's read through that, I'm assuming. Any more questions on that?
Not much goes on that, but it was very nice to see a full report. So I don't know who did that, but thank you very much. That's got to be something that council revisits in the near future.
Yeah, nice to have those reports. For sure.
Thank you.
Nothing for old business. Item number 6, new business. 6.1, River Road Safety. And I think Councillor Monder wanted to talk about this.
Sure. I have been receiving emails from residents in regards to the safety of River Road or lack thereof. Summertime seems to be especially dangerous with motorcycles, cars racing, the motorcycles racing, the noise. It's a River Road for the residents of basically South St. Andrews is a huge draw where they bicycle, walk their dogs, run. There's bike races on the weekends, pedal bike, and it's becoming such a dangerous place that you can't do that. So residents are not able to use the road. And there's many different places along that road of historical nature that people want to visit, be it the rectory, the church, the Scott House, all the way down to the Lockport Dam. And if you go across, you can visit the museum, even though it's closed. So all these things are huge benefits to our community, and that we could be utilizing them, but it's unsafe for the residents to do so. So I would like us to get together. Hopefully we can come up with some solutions or remedies to prevent the things that the residents are calling me and contacting me about, and hopefully we can do something.
Are we able to get maybe a report from RCMP or bylaw of any type of reports that have come from complaints or?
That was something I think Mr. Betsy had. We're gonna do some reports. Right, because you said you're gonna get monthly reports for the RCMP, like.
No, I haven't, but
We,
Yeah.
excuse me, we don't get monthly, but they come quarterly. And so we get a quarterly report, always have, and usually the inspector comes to that cow meeting. And the River Road has always been on top of the list to ask them, and they say they patrol. We tell them when the times they need to patrol, you know, not in the mornings on a weekday, it's in the evenings, you know, and so it's constantly, and I don't know, you're right, it would be good to see that report or refresh our memory on it to see how many calls or concerns they get from River Road, because they do have number of calls. I don't know whether they're structured down to the numbers in that area, but I think there's one item on there where it says, you know, traffic concerns or traffic racing. So we can pull out those you know, half a dozen of those quarterly reports over the years and look at them. And then when the inspector does come again, we can put that on the top of our list and see what they're going to do to increase patrols on that part of provincial highway.
And I think that's key, is provincial highway, so are our hands tied with it being a provincial highway, not an RM?
Yeah, but there's no reason why we can't converse, like the gentleman that called me's already contacted the minister for roads, and they're in agreement that they can do something. They need input from the RM to say that we want to. And we need to work in conjunction with each other, not just the RCMP. I think this is a bigger thing than just a few RCMP officers patrolling. I think we need to do other things to mitigate what's going on there. Whether it be speed bumps, flashing signs, speed signs, something needs to be done other than an RCMP officer sitting in the park that is only there very temporarily. You know, it's a huge concern.
Mhm.
Like, I live right next to River Road, and I refuse to go on that road with my little daughter because it's so dangerous. And I know that other people feel the same. And it's a huge draw. You know, the river floats by, it's a great place to take your kid to, you know, show her nature and all kinds of things. You know, there was a fox denning last year right on the river, right by her house. Mother with 2 foxes. What happened to those? One was dead before, you know, May went around. And the other one was, you know, almost being hit by cars on a daily basis. Because they, you know, no one's paying attention. And they're going too fast. And all it's gonna take is some little kid to get killed, and we're all gonna be like, oh my God, why didn't we do anything about that? You know, we should be preemptive and look at this. So.
Do some brainstorming for some ideas, what we can do, maybe lobby the province a little bit to see what they can come up with as well.
Yeah, if I can just add to what Councilor Montour said, they had the same problem in the city with Wellington Crescent. And they cured it by you know, putting up barriers and whatnot, and just designating it on certain days, I believe.
Yeah, that was one of my ideas that I brought up to council a while ago, was we could put barriers in Wellington Crescent at the front and at the back, like at the south and north end of River Road, and say local traffic only on the weekends. During the week.
Walking, bicycling.
Yeah,
that
so
kind of
people
stuff.
of the community could utilize that and feel safe.
But then
Wellington
it's-
Crescent works wonderfully. If you ever drive or walk down there, it's a great place. You know, they look at nice old $1 million houses. Well, we have $1 million view looking at the river that's flowing by and all the wildlife.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't disagree.
So,
Mhm. Again, perhaps we could even turn this to our advantage by promoting it in terms of possibly holding different events. And you mentioned that there's bicyclists using the part of the road. perhaps we could look at, hosting some sort of bike event, where we, close the road off on those high traffic days. I think really what you're talking about is Saturday, Sunday and Monday, or Saturday, Sunday and Monday
sure.
on a long weekend that you get
Yeah,
the high speed activity.
but then, I think even if you do that, you still have to mitigate it with other things. Like the speed bumps, like the things that we're talking about, because you can't, those bikers and those cars are there racing throughout. Not just on the weekends, so,
So who would do the speed bump? Us or the problem?
That's something you'd have to talk to the province and see what they can do for something like that. There'd have to be a meeting with them and go over exactly what the options would be.
Is that something where you come into the picture or?
Well, we would have to contact the province if it's, we know where it's a provincial road. There's a couple of things, right? Like, I think it's a fabulous idea and it's something that it's really good for St. Andrews. Speed bumps are detrimental to snow clearing. So they cause an issue there, but you can elongate them so they're lower. So that's something that we have to think about, and then, the province has to buy into it. But we also have to think of all the residents on River Road and maybe some public consultation that we're doing this. We just can't shut the street down, in my mind, one day without having some consultation and education and buy-in from everybody. So, I think that's a really good idea. Get the public engagement, to get them involved and move on from there.
like, I know maybe it was just because of COVID for the last 2 years, but it's been way overboard with the amount of cars, with the amount of motorcycles, with the amount of everything going down that road for the last 2 years. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's busier sometimes than Main Street, number 9 highway. So.
Is that something you wanted to spearhead with the Minister of Transportation? You want to just have a quick meeting about it afterwards and go over it?
Sure.
So we can do the delegation.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more comments? In-camera item. Number 7.1, motion that council move in camera at 6:34 to discuss matters that are in preliminary stages respecting which discussion in public could prejudice the municipality's ability to carry out its activities or negotiations, as well as legal and personnel issues. And further, that members of council agree to keep in confidence a matter that is discussed at a meeting that is closed to the public under subsection 152, as parentheses 3, and that the committee decides to keep confidential to the matters discussed at a meeting of the council or committee conducted in public. Can I get a mover, please? Councilor Sliker, seconder. Councilor Hunt. All in favor?
Aye.
That concludes our in-camera session. Motion to move out of camera at 7:18 PM. Can I get a mover, please? Councilor Sliker, seconder, Councilor Mareki, all in favor?
Aye.
And that will conclude our meeting here. Let's motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:19 PM. Can I get a mover, please? Councilor Feeblecorn, and that will conclude
Second.
our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, Lorraine.
Good night, Lori.